When Ukraine received its first batch of F-16s from its Western partners, it started to turn the tide in the aerial war against Russia. That tide isn't fully turned yet. But Ukraine is now in a position where it can use F-16s to defend against Russian missile strikes and launch its own attacks on key targets. But there's more coming. Much more. This unbelievable F-16 upgrade will make Ukraine unstoppable if it arrives in the country, and it'll do it by making the country's F-16s far harder for Russian electronic warfare systems to detect, track or target. That upgrade is called the Viper Shield, and testing has already begun on what Defense Express calls an electronic shield in the sky. On June 12, the outlet reported that the makers of the Viper Shield, L3Harris, had begun official tests on a new electronic warfare counter system that is already eagerly awaited by 6 countries that have already placed orders. The new shield will be compatible with the F-16V or F-16 Viper, of which Ukraine is already operating several. Officially named the AN/ALQ254V1 Viper Shield system, the Viper Shield can already be installed on the Block 70 and Block 72 versions of the F-16V. L3Harris also says that it can be used on the Block 40 and Block 50 variants without requiring any structural redesigns to the aircraft. Even older F-16 models aren't being left out either. With the addition of external pods, those older models can also use the Viper Shield to protect themselves against Russia's electronic warfare threats. Testing on the Viper Shield began in January 2025, says Defense Express, with L3Harris reporting that hardware production for the system is already underway as tweaks are being made to its software to ensure it's as effective as possible. The first deliveries of the Shield are expected to take place toward the end of 2025, with full-rate production beginning at some point in 2026. Right now, 6 countries have collectively ordered 168 Viper Shield systems, and the odds are high that many more orders will come once the Viper Shield proves its effectiveness outside of testing facilities. Of course, this all leads to the obvious question: what does the Viper Shield do exactly? Wes O'Donnell provides the basics in a YouTube video covering the new system. O'Donnell, who is a US military veteran who's carved out a career for himself as a journalist and author since leaving the military, says to
think of it as a digital force field. It doesn't make your jet invincible, it just makes it exponentially harder to shoot down.
Now, the system's manufacturer, L3Harris, provides more details on its website. It dubs the Viper Shield a next-generation EW, or electronic warfare system, that it has developed in partnership with Lockheed Martin. The system uses commercial off-the-shelf technology and is capable of creating a virtual electronic shield around an F-16 that protects it against threats including jamming and signal interference. The system includes an advanced digital radar warning receiver, or DRWR, with that technology integrating directly into the newer versions of the F-16's APG-83 active electronically scanned array radar. That integration delivers better situational awareness to a pilot, meaning they're more able to spot incoming threats or targets and react accordingly. Viper Shield also has a digital radio frequency memory-based jamming system, which it uses to guard F-16s against the jamming threats mentioned earlier. It's also simpler and thus costs less than other electronic warfare systems. Viper Shield is designed with fewer critical components than previous generation EW systems. This not only results in a smaller form factor and reduced weight, but also a higher mean time between failure and lower lifecycle costs, says L3Harris. These design choices also mean that the Viper Shield is modular, which allows for the replacement of damaged systems in the field. Then there's the software. Like the Viper Shield's hardware, the system's software is designed to allow future upgrades to be carried out as easily as possible. That's vital. Current threats are what the Viper Shield has to contend with right now. But over time, Russia, or another enemy, may learn more about how the shield works, meaning they'll be able to come up with countermeasures. By ensuring modularity in hardware and software, L3Harris can constantly tweak the Viper Shield so it's as capable of dealing with emerging and future threats when they arise as it is of dealing with existing threats. Modularity also matters for installation, as O'Donnell explains, while referring to the system's modular nature.
That last part matters because instead of cutting into the jet and rewiring the whole thing like you're restoring a classic Mustang, you can just plug the system in. Internal installs will go into Block 70 or 72 aircraft.
Think about what this means for Ukraine. Right now, F-16s have been in the country for less than a year. It didn't receive its first batch until August 2024, meaning its pilots and engineers are still learning how the F-16 works. Sending a new shield that requires the complete rewiring of the few F-16s Ukraine has would be risky. Outside of the sheer amount of time the fighter jets would have to be grounded to complete the rewiring, there are also plenty of opportunities for things to go wrong during the process. Ukraine doesn't want to risk accidentally losing one of its F-16s while trying to protect the aircraft. With the Viper shield, it wouldn't have to. The technology is essentially plug and play with most versions of the F-16. Even the older variants that require an external pod to host the shield don't need to be dramatically altered to make use of L3 Harris's remarkable new technology. O'Donnell goes into more detail about precisely what the Viper shield delivers to an F-16 pilot.
Well, first of all, radar warning receivers that don't just chirp, it paints a clear picture of what's lighting you up.
In other words, a pilot will be able to identify the specific threat they face as soon as the Viper shield detects it, providing extra seconds for reacting that can prove invaluable in the skies above Ukraine. The jammers are also more effective than anything the F-16s have had before.
Digital RF memory jammers that doesn't just scream into the void, it mimics, misleads, and messes with radar.
That turns the F-16 into what O'Donnell calls a mischievous ghost, a target that's far more elusive than it's ever been before and is now capable of confusing incoming threats till all they hit is air. Make no mistake about it, the Viper shield is a very impressive system. Here's how it could make a massive difference if Ukraine can get its hands on it. Firstly, the Viper shield essentially acts as an invisible shield for F-16s. That has the benefits previously outlined, such as Ukraine not having to rewire its fighter jets to use the shield. However, it also means that Russia won't be able to easily detect that shield is in use, though it may still detect jamming signatures or altered radar warning receivers, unless Ukraine deploys it on an older F-16 that requires the external pods mentioned earlier. To the outside looking in, most F-16s that use the Viper shield will look like any other F-16. That will cause Russia to treat Ukraine's jets like the models that haven't been upgraded, which only makes the Viper shield even more effective. It's one thing to counter armor that can be seen. It's quite another to figure out how to overcome armor that's invisible to the naked eye. With this invisible armor, Ukraine also has the ability to create more safe zones above its territory, as O'Donnell explained.
The skies over Ukraine aren't just dangerous, they're a no-fly zone for anything that blinks wrong on radar. We're talking S-400s, Pantsers, Iranian drones, and enough electronic warfare noise to drown out half of the Eurovision Song Contest.
That's a very good point. Russia hasn't been able to establish full aerial superiority against Ukraine with its fighter jets, even though it controls some airspace near its borders and has a fleet several thousand strong, compared to Ukraine's estimated 150 to 200 aircraft. Ukraine's air defenses and drones have been too effective to allow that to happen. However, Russia has countered by mimicking Ukraine's tactics. Russia peppers the territory it captures with air defense systems. It launches drones in their hundreds against Ukrainian cities and military infrastructure. A lack of Russian fighter jets and other aircraft doesn't mean the skies above Ukraine are any safer for Ukraine's pilots. Now, none of this means that Ukraine isn't trying to use its F-16s as much as it can. In April, Air and Space Forces reported on comments made by US Army General Christopher G. Cavoli, who said that F-16s taking the skies was a daily occurrence for Ukraine.
They fly every day. They've defeated a large number of cruise missile threats, and they've delivered an awful lot of offensive attacks as well, specifically bombing attacks in the east.
Ukraine is using its F-16s as best it can. However, even the best of those fighter jets can't compare with the more modern Russian fighters and air defenses Vladimir Putin is capable of deploying. That's according to Ukraine Air Force spokesman Yuri Ignat, who provided an assessment of Ukraine's aerial situation following the May 16 loss of a third F-16. Unfortunately, today, Russia has jets that see farther and missiles that fly farther, Ignat said. That's even when compared to F-16s. They also have powerful air defenses which work in tandem with aviation. The point Ignat is making is that, for as important as the F-16 is to Ukraine, it's still an older aerial platform. The first operational F-16 was delivered to the US Air Force way back in 1979. And though the versions that Ukraine has have been upgraded and tweaked since then, there's no escaping the fact that the F-16 is a fourth-generation fighter that Ukraine is using against a country that has access to fifth-generation fighters. That's where the Viper shield comes in. L3 Harris's new technology doesn't provide such a substantial upgrade to the F-16 that it can now match Russia's more modern fighters. However, it's enough of an upgrade to improve survivability dramatically. Air defense missiles will be easier to avoid thanks to the shield. Ukraine's pilots will have a better chance to get in, complete their missions and get out before Russia strikes back. The Viper shield is a risk reducer in skies that are still extremely dangerous for Ukraine. The shield also counters one of the most important tools in Russia's collective arsenal: electronic warfare. Multiple examples demonstrate how important this type of technology has been for both Russia and Ukraine in the aerial battle. For instance, September 2023 saw Defense Security Asia report that Russia had successfully deployed an electronic warfare system known as Krasuka. That system creates massive levels of signal interference that's capable of disrupting the navigation equipment inside Ukraine's aircraft. It's effective within a range of 93 miles, and according to Russia's Ministry of Defense, it's proven effective enough to force Ukraine's jets to fly at lower altitudes so they can avoid detection by air defense systems. Flying low creates risks. The same goes for trying to pilot a fighter jet that has lost its navigational systems. Thanks to the Krasuka, a pilot has to fly blind, which is a recipe for a failing mission at best and getting shot down at worst. The Viper shield may be able to solve these problems if it's deployed in Ukraine. To emphasize the important role electronic warfare plays in the Ukraine war, Forbes senior contributor David Hambling wrote in March that Ukraine and Russia are now engaged in a deadly electronic warfare arms race. Both deploy vast quantities of electronic and satellite jamming systems. Spoofing devices have become more common, with these devices forcing weapons to miss their targets. What's now unfolding is the constant evolution of electronic warfare technology as Ukraine and Russia race to stay one step ahead of each other. The contest is still ongoing, Hambling wrote when discussing a Russian-controlled reception pattern antenna, or CRPA, called Kometa. Electronic warfare is an obscure field and few are even aware of CRPA and null forming, but the results are a matter of life and death for the people of Ukraine targeted by Russian bombs and drones. Success means a bomb lands in an empty field instead of hitting a building full of people. And that's the point. Electronic warfare and a country's ability to adapt to it and utilize it can make the difference between life and death. In Ukraine's skies, F-16s being equipped with Viper shields would represent a new evolution that puts Ukraine's pilots a step ahead of their Russian counterparts. In the electronic warfare battle, every new system is vital to survival. If the Viper shield lands in Ukraine, it couldn't come soon enough. Referenced earlier were comments made by Yuri Ignat relating to how the F-16 is still a step behind Russia's most advanced fighter jets and air defenses. Also noted, well, these comments came in the wake of Russia managing to down a third Ukrainian F-16 in May. That loss may not have actually been the result of Russia's air defenses. According to the War Zone, the Ukraine Air Force confirmed the loss at about 3:30 AM local time on May 16. According to preliminary data, the pilot destroyed 3 air targets and was working on the 4th using an aircraft cannon. However, an emergency situation arose on board. The pilot took the plane away from the settlement and successfully ejected, the Air Force said. The pilot managed to eject and was safely reclaimed by Ukraine. However, it's clear that a malfunction occurred in his F-16. Was that malfunction unavoidable? Or was it the result of some sort of electronic interference created by Russia? Right now, there's no definitive answer, but if it was the latter, it highlights yet another reason why the Viper shield could prove so invaluable to Ukraine. The country doesn't have an unlimited number of F-16s or pilots to fly them. The war zone says that only 85 operational F-16s have been promised to Ukraine, all from its European allies, and there's no confirmation yet that there are more on the way. A system like the Viper Shield, which improves the survivability of this aerial platform, could prove key to Ukraine, maximizing the effectiveness of that limited number of aircraft while not having to worry so much about losses. It all comes down to risk versus reward. The Viper Shield lowers the risk involved in every F-16 mission, meaning Ukraine can chase after much bigger rewards. Ultimately, the Viper Shield delivers more than a new defensive system, as O'Donnell explains in his video.
Viper Shield is more than a cool gadget, it's doctrine in a box. Think about it, we're finally giving aging aircraft a realistic shot at surviving modern airspace. Instead of relying on stealth alone,
it's the kind of ingenuity and innovation upon which Ukraine has thrived since Putin illegally invaded, and it could revitalize what most see as a legacy platform. But there's a caveat, a big one. Ukraine doesn't have the Viper Shield yet, and as of right now, there are no commitments made by any of the countries that have ordered the Viper Shield to send any. However, the odds may be in Ukraine's favor, and O'Donnell explains why.
First, 6 nations already have contracts for Viper Shield: Bahrain, Bulgaria, Slovakia, Morocco, Taiwan, and Jordan. And guess what Ukraine is getting? Block 70s, the exact models Viper Shield was designed for.
The pieces are already in place, and it's one of those 6 countries that could be the difference maker for Ukraine when it comes to the Viper Shield: Slovakia. Though it's far from the largest supporter of Ukraine in Europe, Slovakia has already donated MiG-29s and S-300s to Ukraine. All told, Slovakia's donations to Ukraine are valued at around $80 million. That's small change when compared to the tens of billions of dollars the US and European Union have given to Ukraine. Still, it shows us that there's plenty of pro-Ukraine sentiment inside the country. So much of that sentiment, in fact, that everyday Slovakians are doing everything they can to help Ukraine. After the country's Prime Minister announced that Slovakia would have to hold all of its aid to Ukraine in April 2024, citizens stepped up by starting a crowdfunding campaign that managed to raise around $2 million in less than 48 hours, with the money being dedicated to a Czech initiative focused on procuring and manufacturing artillery shells for Ukraine. The point here is that the people of Slovakia support Ukraine. Given that Slovakia is receiving Viper Shields, it's not outside the realm of possibility that it may be thinking about donating some of those shields to Ukraine. Nothing is confirmed, but as O'Donnell points out, Slovakia is currently a wild card in the F-16 deck, and it could prove to be a game changer for Ukraine if it decides to go deeper and provide its invaluable F-16 shields to its ally. There's also the possibility that the Viper Shield won't be limited to the F-16 alone. Ukraine's Soviet-era fighter jets may be capable of using it too. After all, it's already been shown that Ukraine, with some help, has managed to modify its MiG-29s so they can fire French-made AASM Hammer standoff precision bombs. Those weapons aren't supposed to work in Russian aircraft. They're designed for NATO-aligned aerial platforms such as the F-16. The question has to be asked, if the Hammer can work in Ukraine's Soviet-era fighters, what's to say that the Viper Shield couldn't? It may be a while before an answer emerges, but that compatibility would be huge for Ukraine. It would suddenly have dozens more aerial platforms beyond the F-16 that are capable of carrying out high-risk missions without being hurt by Russia's electronic warfare countermeasures. And that's the point. With Viper Shield, Ukraine may be able to get its hands on equipment that counters one of Russia's most valuable weapons. The world now has to wait and see if L3 Harris's innovative new system makes its way into Ukraine. And even if the Viper Shield doesn't make its way to Ukraine, Putin still has major problems on his hands. Ukraine has wiped thousands of his artillery units off the map. Find out why that matters and what it means for the Ukraine war in our video. And if you enjoyed this video, remember to subscribe to the Military Show for more coverage of the latest tech that could help Ukraine in its fight against Putin.